It's it's sort of generally quite a trope that conservatives have often a moment that changes the way they think. For instance, for Roger Scruton, it was witnessing May '68. For Edmund Burke, it was the French Revolution. Was there a particular moment for you that that made you a conservative, or was it just something that fell naturally to you?
So I would say there are 2 points on this. I was a conservative before I could relate that to being a conservative voter or a conservative supporter. And my first understanding of what being a conservative was the time of the Silver Jubilee in 1977. And I remember going to London and seeing the Queen and understanding the importance of our country, our constitution, our monarchy, our military. And in those days, there's an incredible military parade through London for the Queen's Silver Jubilee. So whilst I didn't relate that to a particular party, it set off an instinct inside me, which I would describe as patriotism, believing in your country and loving your country. And that translated only a few years later to then relating that to being a supporter of the Conservative Party. And what triggered that was, of course, the election of Margaret Thatcher as Prime Minister.
I was I was reading that you were 14 when you joined the party, so that would have been around 1980, 81.
Yeah, it was 1981.
Okay.
I remember exactly when I joined the party, and I remember my first ever Conservative Party meeting at the age of 14. And I was very unsure about it, as you all are when you join any type of organisation, but particularly a political party. But it didn't take me long to then realise that I'd actually found something in my life that I passionately believed in and wanted to be part of.
It's funny that you mentioned the Silver Jubilee, because I had a similar moment when I was around 6 with the Golden Jubilee in London, and that's one of my earliest memories is going to London in 2002. I actually got lost at one point, and I was sort of just wandering around the Mall on my own. But yeah, it's fascinating. And that stuck with you your entire life. I see there's flags of England and the Commonwealth and Switzerland behind you.
There is indeed, yes, and it has stuck with me forever, actually. Going to the Queen's Silver Jubilee celebrations in London at the age of 11, that sort of remained with me, and it gave me a great appreciation of how wonderful our country is, and the history and the traditions, the heritage that we have inherited. And I think, if anything, being a conservative is about preserving what we have, but building on it and evolving. I think the left always seem to want to start afresh and get rid of what we've got and believe that everything starts, from day one again. Well, I don't believe in that. I believe in continuity, consistency, and building on what we've had before, but evolving it in a way that improves it. And that's what I think Britain is most successful at: evolution as a nation, not revolution. And that's why the monarchy is so important, because it represents 1,000 years of our history, continuity, constitution, and also unity above politics. And that really, I think, then was a natural progression for me wanting to support the Conservative Party. And Margaret Thatcher, I think, stood for the same type of conservative values that I did. And it made me want to become active and involved and support her as Prime Minister.
I can imagine it was probably maybe slightly easier to be a young conservative then than it would be now.
It's very different now, but in those days, of course, there were many more young conservatives, many more young people wanted to be involved in the party. Today, it's very different. Those days, there was political battles to fight. There was real ideological battles to fight. In recent years, the ideological battles have altered. I think there are still ideological battles to fight, by the way. I don't believe that it's all over. We're seeing new battles emerging. And I think that young people are disengaged with politics, or they're misled into having the wrong political views. And I think this has happened over the last few decades. And my party, the Conservative Party, has to fight back against this. It can't go on because I think too many young people have got the wrong understanding about our country, and it's leading them to dislike our country rather than to be proud of it. I was brought up to be proud of our country, My father fought in the Second World War. Both my grandfathers fought in the First World War. So I grew up understanding that what we've got is not free. We've had to fight for it. It's something that others have made huge sacrifices for, that we can have the country we've got. And so I think today's generation need to understand and appreciate that as well.
Mm-hmm. Let's move along to your books. The first one is the Atlas of the World.
Absolutely, yes. It's a reference book, I guess, rather than a book that you read. But goodness me, don't you learn a lot from looking at the atlas? You learn about history, geography. You learn about the environment. You learn about places and peoples, and an understanding of our planet, and the huge differences that exist from every part of the world, from east, north, south to west. Everywhere is different, and everywhere has its unique place within our planet. And for me, one of the greatest things to be able to do is to understand the world, explore the world where you can. I've been very lucky. I've traveled to lots of countries. And I think by doing that, you gain a greater appreciation of how lucky we are to live on this planet, and how important it is to cherish what we have and to preserve it.
Yeah, it's fascinating to look at an old map with places like Zaire or Rhodesia or the Holy Roman Empire on it. It's yeah, you're right. It is because they're always contemporary when they're written. You get this weird window into the past through nations.
You do indeed. And the interesting thing is that although the map of the world changes, quite often the links that are there are deep rooted. And even though the political geography changes, often culturally there are still parts of the world that feel affinity with what was there before. And so it is not a simple question of the world is created by politics. The world is shaped by politics, but it's a lot deeper than that. And when I go to countries around the world, small territories, small countries who particularly have a great affinity to Britain, even though they're no longer under the crown and they're no longer part of the British Empire or even the Commonwealth, there is still that huge, deep understanding and that link to these islands, which they don't particularly want to give away. They still want that link to be there. So looking at the map of the world, you do learn a great deal, but only by visiting these places do you actually get a real appreciation of how interesting and amazing this world is.
We'll get on to countries later on, because you've made a slight alteration to the list of that we're going through, and it seems that this is inspired by a love of the world, love of travel. When did this love first begin for you?
I think that traveling has always been something, in my own mind, it's always been something which I have the urge to do. If you see things, if you meet people, if you visit places, if you study the history, I think you make the most of your life. I think if you stay just in your own backyard, I think not everyone can travel. Not everyone is able to do so. I'm very fortunate that I've been able to do so, and I've taken those opportunities. So ever since I was very young, I've always had the urge to see the world, but it's always been tempered by politics, really, because I'm a political person, and I particularly like to visit places in the world where there's British ancestry, and that to me is really important. I go to places now as an MP to support the links, the retention of those links and those friendships with nations and territories around the world that have had this historical link to the British Isles.
Do you collect things when you travel? I know you're a great lover of flags and iconography. Do you maybe collect like flags where you go, or is there any sort of memento of the places you've been to?
I've got lots of mementos. In fact, recently I've been going through them. My house got flooded in Romford, and I've had to dig out stuff that I'd forgotten I had from places I've been to for over many years. And yes, I do collect things when I go. You can't avoid it. You get given gifts, you get mementos. I've got flags, more flags I think anyone has ever had in my office, and they are useful when we have visitors because you get the right flag out for the right country. But yeah, I think that you do inevitably collect things that remind you of where you've been and tell you something about the place and the history and the geography of that country. So if you come to my office in London, you'll see several shelves full of some amazing, unique items that I've collected from around the world. And one little personal hobby I've got, which I don't think many people know about this, but one personal little hobby I've got is that wherever I go to a country, which is one of Her Majesty's realms or territories, so Australia or Falkland Islands or Bermuda or Jersey or somewhere, I go to the beach and I collect rocks and shells from that. So I've got this huge pot, and it's full of about like 30 different countries and territories where there's like rocks and shells from each of those places I've been to, all mixed together. I can't tell you one from another, right. But there's like a bit of stone from Mount Tumbledown in the Falklands. There's there's stones from the north of Canada, from the Arctic part of Canada. So there's all these interesting, amazing, colourful and huge array of interesting stones and shells, which I keep in a huge glass pot, and it's amazingly beautiful. And I say to people, these are bits of all Her Majesty's realms and territories from around the world. In fact, I need to get a bigger pot because it's growing. It's growing every time I go away.
Is it not labelled by design, so that you look at this sort of mesh of stones and you see it almost doesn't matter where they come from, they were all once part of our wider international family?
But that's true. That's absolutely true. But I do also like to pick one out, and I can slightly remember where it came from. So I've got some of the stones are sort of like slightly pinky, and they're from Bermuda.
Right.
I can tell you the ones from the Falklands because they're particularly distinctive. But yes, it's almost like I've collected bits of the British family from around the world and put them all together in one place. And it sounds like a bit of a weird thing to do, but actually it's a rather nice thing to do, because of all the things you can buy which are souvenirs, this is actually a real piece of all those different places that I visited. And I think there's probably about 30 different places which are all mixed up together in this huge pot.
That's really cool. So going back onto the atlas, do you own just one, or do you own them from throughout the years?
I've got lots of atlases, but yeah, I mean these days, of course, if you want to look at a modern map, you go on the internet and you see what it looks like. But yes, I never get bored with flicking through an atlas, because you see places names of places you don't know, you never knew existed. And every place has a unique story to tell. And I collect old maps as well. So when I go out to antique shops, I see old historical maps, and quite often I buy them too. Again, I probably buy too many, and I finish up putting them in a cupboard and they never get framed. But lately I have had one or two framed recently. I found one of an old historical County of Essex map, which I bought in Portobello Road. And I've got that actually in my office, is sitting over here.
Well, let's move on to your second book. It's the Bible. Were you always religious, or is that something that's come to you later in life?
I was christened at my local church, which is St Edward's, Romford, in the marketplace. If you're from Southend, you probably know Romford. You probably know the church. It's very distinctive. I was confirmed in that church, but in my early years, I was in the Salvation Army. So I used to be in the Salvation Army band. I used to be in what they call the singing company, which is their choir. My father used to work for the Salvation Army, used to be in charge of all their uniforms. So I've had long connections with the Salvation Army, but I've always really been Church of England. I'm a member of 2 churches in Romford, but I go to all churches. As the MP, I get invited to all denominations, and I respect them all, and I love the camaraderie, the fellowship. But I also think that it's far deeper than that. It's about having a moral compass of some kind or another. I'm not judging. I'm not judgmental either. I don't judge people. I think people should live their lives in the way that they choose. I believe in freedom of people to make their own choices in lives, but I do believe there has to be a moral foundation, and that is reflected in this country through our Christian heritage. And so you don't have to be a Christian to respect the Christian heritage or to understand the importance that Christian values have played in the evolution of this country and also in our constitution. I say, as I often say when I go to different churches and I talk about what I do as an MP and about the monarchy and the part the monarchy plays in this, as well as Queen as head of the church, that when the Queen wears the crown, on the top of the crown there is a cross. And to me that says that, you know, everything that we have in this country, is the foundations of it are the Christian heritage. We respect other religions and denominations. We respect people of no religion. And one of the great things about our society and our Christian heritage is that we respect people that have differences and do have different religions. And freedom of religion is something in this country which is vital, and I always would defend that.
Yeah, not just freedom of religion, but also the presence of religion and spirituality. And yeah, you make a good point in the monarch, in that you know, we aren't just, you know, an island full of people. We are a kingdom, a realm, and our monarch is the keeper of the faith.
Absolutely right. And I'm sad to say that in schools these days things are not taught in the way they should be. And that's my biggest fear, is that generations of young people don't really understand some of these things. Even my generation, it was being dumbed down. It's been going on for decades, and I think this is a big mistake. I think teaching young people about the heritage of this country, British history, and the religious foundations of our society are crucial. That's why I've always supported the importance of religious education in schools, of school assembly. And when I go to schools now, sadly, so much of this has been watered down. And people have to be free to make their own choices in life. You know, we don't want the state telling people they must be this or they must be that. But nevertheless, we are the product of our ancestry and the forebears that built what they built and then handed it to us. It's not for us to discard that. In my view, we should preserve it and cherish it.
Yeah, that's Burkean, right? So, you know, we are the custodians. We are, you know, the bridge between the dead and the unborn. Our role is to protect what we're given and then give it on.
I think that's a good philosophy in life. I think that's my philosophy with most things, that whatever I do, I like to do it well. I like to look after it. I like to keep it safe, knowing that I can hand it to someone else to carry on that work. And it's a good philosophy in life to have. People that come and go and have no thought about tomorrow and don't think about the long term, I think that is a huge mistake. I think decisions we make today, we've got to think about the implications of those decisions for the long term. And that's why continuity, based on our history and our heritage and our traditions, I think matters so much. And that's really deep down why I'm a conservative.
Is there a particular book or story or quote from the Bible that particularly resonates with you?
I don't think there's a particular quote from the Bible that I could tell you. I think there are a lot of stories from the Bible that teach you things. And the Bible is almost something that you can pick up and you can read a few paragraphs. And whenever I've done this, I've always found something. You know, it doesn't matter where it is. You pick the Bible up, you open any old page, and suddenly there are a few things that hit out, and suddenly it's relevant to something that's going on in your life. So whilst I can't give you one specific example, I know now that if I spent half an hour flicking through the Bible, I'd find 2 or 3 things that I would find relevant to me today. And that's the beauty of the Bible, that there's so much in there which can inspire you today and can give you ideas and guidance, and also give you a sense of support. You know, there are times when we're on our own, you pick that up, you flick through it, there are things in there that you feel, I'm glad I read that, I feel better because of it. And I think that's the beauty of the Bible. It's it is a book for everyone. And even if you're not a Christian, it's still a book that you can learn from, and it's a book you can gain so much out of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's things that you can read and then meditate on, and yeah, it's timeless, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You realize that some of the problems that we have aren't new.
Yeah, I think you hit on a really good point there. I think human beings, one of the big faults of human beings is we keep relearning from mistakes, reinventing the wheel. And that's another thing I found in life, that you do things really well and you try and get others to learn it, and they want to change it for the sake of changing it. And I just think continuity would save us a lot of time if people can learn from what's gone on before and treat that as a resource, not necessarily copying exactly. But I think it's a good philosophy again, that you build on what you've got, and you don't want to keep going back to the drawing board again and relearning everything. And I think a book like the Bible shows that throughout the history of mankind, we are fallible, we make mistakes, we do things, and the best way of avoiding mistakes is to learn from others.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to your third book, which is George Orwell's Animal Farm.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting book, which I think again taught me a lot about politics, but actually human beings. And whilst when I read the book, in fact, it was a long time ago now when I read Animal Farm, it was at school, and I remember thinking it was about animals. And only when you read the book, you start to think actually it's a little bit more than about animals. And there is a very clear and simple message that comes out of that book. And that is, as I said earlier, human beings are fallible. One set of human beings abuses the power they've got. Another set of human beings come in full of hope, full of confidence that they will do a better job, and with all the solutions to all the problems. But in time, the danger is they also become like the previous lot, and nothing really ever changes. And I actually think there is a lot of truth in that. I'm afraid to say there is a lot of truth in that. And particularly in politics, there are a lot of politicians who will make a difference. If you give them power and they're able to exercise power, they can change the country for the better. Unfortunately, most politicians won't do that. They'll go with the flow. And Animal Farm teaches us that when you get power, you have to make use of that power to do good, not to just feather your own nest and become like the previous lot. And it's an important lesson for everyone in politics. Frankly, it's better not to be in a position of power if you have no purpose to be there. And there are too many, I think, in politics who want power for its own sake, who like the positions and the titles and the idea that they've got this role. But when you really dig down and ask them what they want to achieve, they don't have necessarily a compass that guides them. And that's why politicians like Margaret Thatcher are so outstanding, because they had a clear idea of what they had clear values and beliefs that they were prepared to fight for. And we need more politicians like that, who are prepared to be counted, and when they get power, they use it to do good for our country.
Yeah, because otherwise the revolution just becomes the next regime. The most poignant part of the book for me is the very end, where the pigs and the farmers are in the building and they can't tell them apart. Right? It's that they just become the old regime.
Yeah. It's a lesson for all of us, especially in politics. And I can think of so many examples where I've seen an Animal Farm type scenario play out, and I think that's one of the reasons why I think that when it comes to making decisions about what I want to do, I only want to do them if I can make a difference. I never want a position or being put in a position of power unless I've got the ability to do something with that power. I don't want it for its own sake. It's better not to be in a position of power if you then don't make use of that opportunity.
It also speaks to the importance of having, almost non-mainstream information, right? Because in the story, the only source of information is the rules written on the wall, and eventually it changes and changes and changes, and it's finally left with, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others, because that's the only source of information is, the pigs and the sheep who echo what the pigs want. Information can be changed and changed and changed until it's just whatever the regime wants goes.
Yeah, and we see that today in so many countries around the world, where the people in power will change the system and the rules to suit their own benefit. And okay, look, human beings are infallible; they're not perfect. They will. No one, whoever is in power, nobody is going to never do anything which could be criticised. And all prime ministers have favoured people and policies in this country that they particularly want to favour. And I think that's one of the advantages you have by being in power. For me, I don't mind too much about that. What I do mind is when you're in power and there is no clear ultimate purpose. It's just being in power for the sake of being in power. And there are too many, I'm afraid, who have been in power for the sake of being there, not for the sake of doing something, because they want to achieve something clearly in their mind. And that's why we finish up bobbing around with different ideas that come and go. And I can think of so many examples of that in recent years. So purpose has to come into this. Power on it for its own sake is no good. You have to have a clear purpose. And when you've got that power, you make use of it. And becoming like the previous lot isn't why we should be there. We should be doing something different and better and more forward-looking.
So moving on, normally in this segment we would do music, but I was informed that you'd rather discuss various locations around the world. We've already touched upon your great love of the world and traveling in the books section. So we'll start with your first location, which is the Falkland Islands. We talked at the start about the early Thatcher years being a big part of your political progression. The Falklands War being one of the most defining moments of that period. So, what is it about the Falklands that resonates with you personally?
Well, I've been to the Falkland Islands on 3 separate occasions, and of course, I remember the Falklands War of 1982. That had quite a big impact on me, and it got my interest going in British overseas territories, and also, again, the importance of the wider British family, of which the Falkland Islands are very much a part. So I was very privileged to go to the Falkland Islands for different reasons, actually, on 3 separate occasions. My first visit was in 1989, would you believe? And I went there in a journalistic capacity. But then when I became an MP, I went with the Royal Air Force as part of the Armed Forces scheme. And then I went with the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. So not many people ever go to somewhere as remote as the Falklands. I've been 3 times. And it is an amazing place in the world. It's so remote, but so beautiful. It has an amazing climate and fantastic wildlife. And it has people that live there who are as British as you and I. And they want to stay that way. They don't want to have any other country control and dictate to them. And hence they're proud of their British heritage and they want to stay under the crown. And so I have great affinity with the Falkland Islanders. And it is, I think, a privilege for Britain to still have places the other side of the world that want to still be part of our family, and we have a duty to stand by them.
Does it feel as a place like it's almost untouched, it being so remote?
Yes, it does have that feel about it. Stanley is the capital, but it's like a village. It's not really like a town as we would know it here. It's like a small village, a small town, but it's growing actually since the Falklands War. We've seen quite a large increase in the number of people going to live in the Falkland Islands. So the population is rising, and economically they are self-sufficient. So they don't depend on UK government financial support, except in terms of the military. Of course, we retain a very large military base there, in case of any potential future aggression by Argentina.
So, how does it sustain itself economically? Is it agriculture? Is it what's the economy there?
Well, most of the financial income for the Falklands, it was based on the fishing industry. So squid especially is an important produce of the Falkland Islands, which is exported around the world. There is a possibility of oil in that region, and that's being looked at the moment, but currently there is no oil being extracted, but we hope that that may be a future income for them. But of course, they have the traditional agriculture and sheep farming in the Falkland Islands as well. And tourism. I mean, tourism is obviously it's not a huge industry, but it's nevertheless quite possible to visit the Falklands and have a wonderful holiday there. So it is advertised for tourism, and it is quite possible to get down there. It's a long way, but my goodness, it's worth the journey.
Am I correct in that the climate there is somewhat similar to how it is here?
No, I would say they have. It can be much more windy, and obviously in wintertime it can be quite cold. But in their summertime it can be very warm actually, and it's very easy to get sunburnt. Right. I've been sunburnt in the Falkland Islands, would you believe? So it is possible to get sunburnt, but it is blustery.
Right.
But there are days like we have here. So the climate can be the same as Britain at times, but equally so it can have extreme weather conditions as well. The sun rays are very strong, so anyone that goes to the Falklands, I'd warn them that if they go out walking for too long, you need sun cream because you can get burnt. I got burnt rather badly actually when I last went, so something to watch if you ever go down there.
Moving on to your second location, the first and the third are linked in that they are crown they're under the crown or formerly under the crown. The second one is not. It's Svalbard, an archipelago to the north of Scandinavia.
Yes, well, this is another interesting part of the world. That's the furthest north in the world that I've ever been. The Falkland Islands is the furthest south I've ever been, hence I chose the two. Right. So in the southern hemisphere, to Stanley is the most southerly capital I've ever been. The most northernly is Longyearbyen, which is the capital of Svalbard, or Spitsbergen, I think the island is called. And that is a protectorate of Norway. But because of the research stations that exist there, it is a protected territory, and other countries have the right to be there as well. So there are American, Russian, British, and other countries have research stations based in that territory. And whilst it is under Norwegian sovereignty, it's not actually a part of Norway. It has a special status. Hence, it has international standing. And I've been there twice. It's a fascinating place because it's great, again, for specialist holidays. You can go polar bear watching if you like, if you want to take the risk. But you can also go on the Huskies and all the types of winter sports that you would imagine. The skiing where you don't go downhill, but what do they call that? Ski. Anyway, it's hiking, ski hiking, that kind of thing. Yeah. So all those things go on. But it's an amazing remote little place in a part of Europe which is not explored by many people.
Can you see the Northern Lights from there?
Oh, you can. Yes, I think the time of year that I was there, you couldn't, or if you did. No, I don't think I did when I was there. I think you have to go in really the summertime to see those. But no, I don't think I recall seeing them when I was there. Unfortunately, another reason to go back at the right time of year.
Yeah. Moving moving along to your third choice is Tonga, tucked away right in the Polynesian islands.
Yeah, I mean, this is another place I've been to twice, actually, believe it or not. It's rare that anyone would go to Tonga, but it is a fascinating place. And this is the most easterly point of the world I've been to. So we had the most northerly, the most southerly, and this is the most easterly point. And that is Tonga, which is an independent country, but it's in the Commonwealth, and they have their own monarchy. So they have their own royal family, and their connections to Britain are very strong. They cherish their links to the United Kingdom, and they're very famous for the Queen of Tonga was very famous in coming to our own Queen's coronation in 1953. She was very famous at that time, and the people of Tonga feel great affinity with the people of the United Kingdom. But they are a Polynesian island. They're in the South Pacific region. They're very remote and they're very poor. You know, they're not a rich country. And one of the things that I found when I went there is that we do give them quite a lot of support, perhaps not enough in terms of international aid. But the trouble is they didn't realize we were giving it to them because everything was branded money from the European Union. And they confronted me while I was there and said, why does Britain give us nothing? We get so much from Europe, but we get nothing from the UK. And I had to explain to them, because, you know, the European flag was on everything. And I had to explain to them that actually we do fund the European Union for this purpose. So it is British money that they're getting, at least in part. And that was a big surprise to them. And that led me to say to Andrew Mitchell, who was the became the Secretary of State for International Development, that this is really bad for our country, that people are not aware of the money that we're giving. And he then brought in the new Union Jack emblem for the former DFID department, so that people could see it was British money that was arriving on their shores.
It looks like just a stunningly beautiful place. You know, blue water, nice white beaches. And again, same with I was saying about the Falklands and Svalbard, is that it looks like it's just untouched, untainted. It's just it's natural, it's pure.
There are lots of parts that are, but I warn you, it is third world in many ways. So when you go to many of these places in the South Pacific, they are not. They're idyllic. They look incredible. They look beautiful, but they're not wealthy, and a lot of people do live below what we would consider to be the poverty line. And I think that this is often misunderstood. So that region of the world is not a rich area. They get a lot of help from Australia and New Zealand. There are various organizations that do a lot of work in countries like Tonga and others. But it's a part of the world that perhaps Britain hasn't been as active in as we should in recent years. And I hope that can all change.
Great. Let's move along again to your films, and you selected something that I think will fill any proud Brit with a bit of excitement, which is the James Bond series.
Yeah, well, I'm a big James Bond fan. I have to admit, I very rarely get time to watch too many films. I'm always busy. I do occasion, but when there's a James Bond film on, I like to have it. It's a great advertisement for Britain and the British film industry. It promotes British culture. It promotes a very British stroke English approach to the world, which I think isn't a bad thing. And I think that they're also exciting. They are exciting, and then you sort of get glued, don't you? With a James Bond film, you do get glued to the screen. I've never found one that I found boring. I mean, there are really good ones, there's not as good ones, but they're all pretty excellent, and a great product that we have exported around the world. James Bond is a great British product and great films, and yeah, it's always pleased to watch them when they come on. Yeah, which is quite regularly. It's quite often a James Bond film pops up. So
it's a good advert for sort of the idealized image of the English gentleman, right? Like Bond is always suave, always has the right line. He's always he's always just there, and Yeah, I mean, I was born in '96, so I'm a bit too young for the Brosnan films. So I sort of, I grew up with the Daniel Craig ones, but I've recently gone back and watched the old Roger Moore and Sean Connery ones, and they're just so fun.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with the Roger Moore period, and then I think Pierce Brosnan was the next one. I think.
Mm.
Yeah, so those two I would say I grew up with, but the Roger Moore ones were the earlier ones that I remember. And what's interesting to look at the old ones, how they developed throughout the years. They have altered, but the principles of those films have remained pretty much intact, and that's their success. That they've kept the same storyline, if you like, and the same culture around the films, but at the same time it's moved into different decades, and so it's very hard to get bored with a James Bond film.
Are you worried for the future of the franchise with this new cultural zeitgeist of, I suppose, what can be labeled woke? Do you think that'll sort of taint the films going forward?
Yes, I do worry about this very much so. I worry about the fact that there are so many films and programs that we're not meant to watch anymore, and not allowed to watch. I think it's madness. Look, you can't undo history. You can't change the world. The world evolves. The world will change. Attitudes change. People change. What we do today perhaps was very different to what we did even 10, 20 years ago, let alone 100 years ago. So the idea that we judge today on yesterday on today's standards is completely crazy. It's almost like we're trying to abolish history and abolish culture and abolish who we are and what we've been. What you do is you learn from it, you change. I'm not saying that you would do the same today as we did 20, 30, 40 years ago, but I remember the comedies of the 1970s and 1980s, and they still make me laugh, and I don't understand why everything has to, people should stop being offended and start understanding that we have evolved like no other country in a really positive direction, that attitudes have changed by and large in a positive way. But let's not turn in on ourselves and condemn every generation that's gone before us. Let's build on what they did, evolve in a positive way, but cherish everything we've got in this country. Cancelling our culture and abolishing our history is not the way to approach anything.
Yeah, you're right. Things have changed, but also some things are just timeless. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Bond being, a smooth talking, cigarette smoking, martini drinking, danger man in a nice suit. That I'm happy for that to stick around for generations to come.
100%, and I think that it is just completely wrong to try to present these things as being outdated. Nothing is outdated. It depends on what you like and what you choose. We live in a free society. If I choose to watch old films, or some people choose to watch really old films, like 20s and 30s, whether it's Laurel and Hardy or whatever it might be, you can't condemn all these things because the attitudes of those days are very different to the attitudes of today. You just have to accept that the world changes and live with the world as it is, rather than try to pretend that things were different when in fact things were just done differently in those days. You can't just get rid of that and pretend it never happened. So this cancel culture is not something that I have any time for.
And it's just going to negatively affect the British film industry, which is, for decades has been a massive part of our very, very good cultural output. Do you have a particular favorite Bond film?
I think that probably I like the Live and Let Die. Probably that was a good one. Living Daylights was a good one too. I particularly like that one because he jumped off onto the Rock of Gibraltar with a Union Jack parachute, and there was the rock ape ready to greet him. So I think that's probably one of my favourites too. But they're all pretty good.
Yeah, I love to have an Aston Martin and a, in a Savile Row suit. I think I would never wear anything else. Let's move along to your objects. You've listed a few here: a replica of the Bounty ship and a portrait of the Queen. But the one that I really want to focus on is a series of birds from Nicaragua that were given to you by the ambassador for your work in Central America. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, as we spoke about earlier, I have many gifts and things that are given to me as an MP in countries I visited, and people that come to visit me here in London, and they present me with things. You can't keep everything, but you do. There's certain things that you personally like, and you think, I'm going to keep that. So yeah, I have a little collection of birds. In fact, I'm looking at them at this very moment. I think we could even show you one, actually. I know this isn't being broadcasted, but there you go. That's one of them. So they're all pretty much like that, and I've got about 15 of them. Anyway, I like animals, and I like the fact that they are beautifully painted in the way that they do in Central America. And so over the years, I've collected them, and each one of them was given to me by the Nicaraguans. So every time I meet the ambassador, actually, there's even a fish there. So don't collect the fish particularly, but there are similar ones of fish. So the ambassador does give them to me as gifts when she visits, or I go to one of their events. And of course, you can get them if you go to Nicaragua. I've been there once. But yeah, it's just a very nice display in the office. I think an MP's office should be colourful and interesting. I think an MP's office that is just full of Hansards and papers is rather boring. Mine is not boring. I've got things from all over the world. I've got portraits and photographs, coats of arms. And when anyone comes to my office, they spend quite a lot of time looking at everything and commenting on things and saying, oh, where did that come from? And that's good. It's lots of points of interest when people visit my office in the Houses of Parliament.
So it's your office. It's not an office. It's your office.
Yeah, we all have our own individual office, and it's ours to do as we choose and to decorate it in the way that we like.
Yeah.
And mine is particularly interesting. Most people come to my office do spend a lot of time looking at all the things that I have on display.
Are they made of wood, those animals?
These birds I think they must be made of balsa wood. Okay. Very light. Yeah.
So you included a replica of the Bounty ship, an old Royal Naval vessel, and a portrait of Her Majesty.
Yes, well, I'm looking at the ship. It's quite delicate, actually. It's handmade, hand carved by the Deputy Mayor of Pitcairn Islands. Okay. So it's actually the Bounty. It's a model of the Bounty ship brought to me from Pitcairn itself. So you couldn't buy it anywhere. It's unique, and it's in my office, and it's wonderful to have here because Pitcairn, of course, is a British overseas territory, a very small one. In fact, it has a tiny population of something like 50.
Yeah, it's very, very hard to get to, isn't it?
Very hard to get to. Yeah. But it was, of course, has a great history in terms of the mutiny on the Bounty and the fact that Fletcher Christian went to Pitcairn. They took over that little island. They made it their home. You know, they got together with young ladies from that part of the world, and they created their own colony. And the rest is history. I mean, it's pretty amazing story. But of course, the next chapter of that story is that they then up sticks and left, or a lot of them did, and went to Norfolk Island, which is much closer to New Zealand and Australia. And Queen Victoria gifted the island to them. She sort of forgave them. Pitcairn was made a colony. They went to Norfolk Island, which was another colony, and they settled there. And so today you have Norfolk Island, which is another interesting place, which I've been to, and very interesting political issues going on there in terms of their current democracy and the rights of the people in that territory, which is now under Australia.
And lastly, the portrait of the Queen.
Well, I think every MP's office should have a portrait of their head of state, and I have one over there. It's an amazing portrait, actually. It's a really beautiful one from when she first became Queen. But there's a bit of history to the one I have here. It's not just a picture of the Queen that I've just had framed, it was given to me by a very good friend of mine who came from Montserrat, which is another British overseas territory. His name was Lloyd Thomas. He was an outstanding man of great character and great patriotism. Oh, it's coming off the wall to show you. Here it is. So there you go.
Oh, well, yeah, beautiful.
So on the back there, you see there's an inscription. So it was given to me by Lloyd Thomas. He's was president of the Commonwealth Conservative Association, and he's from Montserrat. And he was given this, or he had this from a boy, and he gave it to me, and I had it framed. But he died fairly shortly afterwards, so I quite treasure that. So, Daniel, make sure you don't drop it, please. Make sure it goes back without. I've got my friend Mr. Kavczynski, the member for Shrewsbury, here, helping me with some of these props. But no, it's a fantastic portrait, and very, everyone admires it when they come to the office.
I suppose it's good to look at to almost remind you that you are what you do is in service of the crown, of the of the monarch and of the kingdom.
I think everyone should have that attitude. We nothing is more important than our country, and the Queen is our head of state, and everyone should respect that, regardless of their political and personal views. And we should all be there for the good of the country and the good of the people of this country. And I think that being elected to Parliament for me is about serving my country. It's not about me. It's not about my political career and what positions and roles I particularly want. It should first and foremost be about what can we do to serve the country that we're so proud to be part of, and plus, of course, our own local constituencies. That's what it should be about. And I think that it's not always explained to people. There's a big misunderstanding about MPs. A lot of people have disdain for MPs. They think, oh, you're all out for your own gain. It's all self-serving, and you lot are no. I've heard it so many times, and I just think it's sad that too many people really believe that. It's not true. I'm not saying that every MP is is absolutely doing all the right things they should do, but the idea that MPs are not there for the right reason, I think is overwhelmingly untrue. And I think most people want the best thing for their country, regardless of their political views.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Okay, so we're on to the last two now. It's your historical figure and your modern figure. Your historical figure is Ian Gow, who was a parliamentarian and a solicitor who was sadly killed by the IRA.
Yes, well, Ian Gow was a friend of mine. I knew him actually from 1982. That's when I first met him. I was in those days. I was just the political officer of the Romford Young Conservatives, and I saw that he was the parliamentary private secretary to the Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher. And I wrote to him and said, would he come to Romford to speak to the Young Conservatives? And I just never thought he would, but he did. He said, yes, I'll come. And he came. And I remember the meeting. We had a packed meeting of about 100 people when he came. It was an amazing event. It's the first meeting I'd ever chaired. So it's quite an experience for me to have chaired that meeting. But anyway, after that, he wrote to me and we kept in touch. And then I got more involved in the party, and eventually, throughout, helped me with my political career. He supported me on many occasions at events and special things that happened where he would attend and speak. And then when I put my name forward to stand as a member of Parliament, he was one of the people who sponsored me to stand for Parliament. And I stood for Parliament in 1992, and I was approved to stand for the party as a candidate in 1988, would you believe? He was murdered in 1990, so he never lived to see me stand as an MP. But of course, I've always honoured his memory, and his loyalty to Mrs. Thatcher during the most difficult periods. Actually, he was there for her. He stood by her. He was with her, and she actually depended on him very strongly. So a great admirer and supporter of Ian Gow. And one of the things that I fought for when I became an MP in 2001 was to get the coat of arms of Ian Gow displayed in the chamber of the House of Commons. The coat of arms of Erin Eve was there, but Ian Gow sadly wasn't. And in fact, there was 2 other MPs that were murdered by Irish terrorism. They were not there either. So we managed to get Ian Gow's inscription placed in the chamber of the House of Commons. And then after that, the other 2 followed on. So now all 4 MPs that were murdered by Irish terrorist atrocities are now honoured in the chamber.
How highly does that rank for you in terms of the moments in your career in Parliament that you're most fond of?
That moment?
Yeah.
Well, that was a special moment. You mean getting the crest for Ian Gow?
Yes.
That was a very special moment because I'd been told for quite a long time before that it wasn't possible to do, that the Erin Eve one was a unique decision to have that decided by the incoming Prime Minister at the time, Mrs. Thatcher, because he was close to her as well. And I was told that we couldn't have one for Ian Gow, but I didn't give up on this. I carried on asking for this to happen. And in the end, what happened is that we had a new speaker, John Bercow. And I worked with Lord Howe, Sir Geoffrey Howe, who was Chancellor under Mrs. Thatcher and also knew Ian Gow very well. And we went to see John Bercow and we asked him whether he would consider this. And he, to his credit, John Bercow immediately said, and he helped to make it happen. So it's thanks to John Bercow that eventually we did get the shield in memory of Ian Gow.
Mm-hmm. Was there a difference between his public persona in Parliament and the private persona that he would have shown to you when he came to that first event that you planned, or was he just the same person wherever he was?
He was one of the people the same wherever he had this. He was the same all the time. There are people that give an impression 1 minute and then the next minute they're different. He wasn't one of those people. He was consistent. You saw what you got with Ian. He was somebody who was truly authentic, and he was also a very kind, decent, genuine man who was there in politics for the right reason. He had a great sense of humour. He got along with everybody, but he was very clever and very canny. And I think that Mrs. Thatcher depended on him very strongly. Sadly, he was murdered in July 1990. I think that had he not been murdered in July 1990, Mrs. Thatcher's challenge to her later that year would have been very different. I think that he would have made a big difference between her continuing as Prime Minister and not. Because if you remember, Mrs. Thatcher only failed to get 2 or 3 votes that she could have got to take her the 15% over the line. If you remember the way that leadership election was conducted in those days, she needed 50% plus 15%, and she was only like a handful of votes short. I think that if Ian had still been around, he would have made damn sure that she had got all the votes she needed. And I think history would have been different. I think she would have been Prime Minister for a lot longer.
So he was a fiercely loyal man.
Fiercely loyal, fiercely patriotic, and one of the first people to condemn the moves that were being made at that time towards the creation of a federal Europe. So he was one of the early Eurosceptics, and he would have been fiercely in support of us leaving the European Union had he been around to be part of that referendum.
He probably would have fiercely opposed Maastricht then as well.
Undoubtedly, he would have done, as indeed Mrs. Thatcher did. And had she remained as Prime Minister, we would never have had the Maastricht Treaty, and therefore we'd never had political union, and history would have been very different. So sadly, the murder of Ian Gow, I think, had a profound impact on British history. It's not probably been recognised as such, but I think his murder really, if that hadn't have happened, I think Mrs. Thatcher probably would have carried on as Prime Minister. She'd have won that leadership election with the majority she needed, and then we'd never had the Maastricht Treaty, and Britain would have gone in a different direction at that point, rather than all these years later and having to go through the referendum and Brexit. I think we'd have pivoted in a different direction then, which is what she wanted to do.
And also, I suppose for you personally, if he was the first parliamentarian who you really brushed shoulders with, I mean, you never forget the first person in politics to really sort of take you under their arm and give you a little boost, right?
100%, yes. I mean, I wouldn't say Ian was the only one. There was other MPs as well that were supportive of me at that time. So I've known many MPs over the years, most of whom sadly are no longer around. But yeah, I think you've always got to be grateful to those people who helped you when you're younger. People that give you opportunities and give you a lift up to greater things are always people you should remember and respect and always be grateful to. Another MP I'd like to perhaps mention is Bill Cash, who is still around.
Right. Yeah.
Another one who quite a lot of MPs have been supportive of me over the years, but yeah, Ian was particularly special because of I was so young and he was so kind, and of course of the tragic way he was murdered. Of course, he was the first person to introduce me to Mrs. Thatcher, and I became friends with Mrs. Thatcher, of course, as well. So it's thanks to him that I got to know Mrs. Thatcher.
Right. And lastly, your modern figure, which is, as you mentioned before, the Queen.
I think it's got to be the Queen. I mean, there's nobody else it can be other than the Queen. She is the glue that keeps our country together. She brings unity, stability, and wonderful sense of duty, I think, compared to other people. I mean, we're talking at the moment about footballers and what they're saying and doing and all the rest of it. And I think, well, come on, there is no one that shows duty and loyalty of service to our country than the Queen. And I think that we just need to make sure that people in this country understand how lucky we are to have a constitutional monarchy and a head of state that's devoted her entire life to the service of the nation and has never put a foot wrong. So yes, she will always be my first choice and my greatest heroine, if you like, in this country.
Yes, so someone who's served this country diligently for 7 decades without ever once being political.
Precisely, and I'd like some of our footballers to take a leaf out of her book as well, actually, at the moment.
Yes, this episode may go out after the football things died down, so it's, to people listening, I'm not sure how relevant this still is, but yes, no, she's just the consummate public servant. Yeah.
Yes, indeed, and of course, I hope she continues to go on for a very long time, and next year we'll be celebrating her Platinum Jubilee, which is the longest period that any British monarch, in fact, I think anyone in the world, has served for 70 years as head of state. So what an amazing celebration we're going to have next year.
I recall watching the funeral of Prince Philip, and while it was it was very emotional and quite sort of hard to watch at times, especially the sight of seeing her on her own, masked up, just in the chapel. I came away from that with just a massively reinforced respect for her as not only a public servant, but also someone who's just remarkably strong. She's basically charmed everyone she's ever met, right?
Absolutely, yes. She is a very charming person, but also someone with a great sense of humour. I was very privileged to have lunch with the Queen actually a few years ago when she came to Romford. She came to my constituency and I sat with her in the church hall over lunch. So I had a wonderful conversation with her. And what was amazing is how down to earth she is and how much of a sense of humour she has and how she has time for everyone. And really, when you look around the world and you look at presidents and prime ministers, how lucky we are to have a head of state who is above party politics, but is such a wonderful human being as well. So I think we should all be saluting Her Majesty at this time, especially as we look forward to her 70th anniversary Platinum Jubilee next year.
Absolutely. Great, Andrew. I think we'll leave it there. It's been very fun to pick your brain over the last hour or so in two different parts. But yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and glad to be on the programme. And thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you.